By way of quick introduction, my name is Joe Sullivan. I'm an engineering manager in our solutions organization focused on the data analytics portfolio. So we cover everything from traditional databases up through open source ecosystems, analytics, structured, unstructured. So naturally, we've been working with Microsoft SQL Server for quite a long time. We go back over a decade in my team, focused on various releases of SQL over the years, and it's been interesting the last few years, going back to say SQL 16, 17, to see where Microsoft has transitioned in that platform, right? So if you think back, they introduced some of the machine learning capability, Polybase, and some of the scale-out query capability, SQL on Linux in 2017, which is a big step forward for Microsoft, especially at that time. And then into SQL 19, with key things like big data clusters, right? So lots of new features and functionality. And if we were worried about the pace of technology, well, here we are 3 days after SQL 19 G8, and we're going to talk about what's next and what's coming next year for SQL, and how that fits into some of what we're doing as a service and building data platform as a service together. So hybrids here, I saw everyone raise their hand. Mostly someone had something in Azure. I would reckon most companies have something on-prem, and even companies that are all in on Azure are starting to look at different scenarios out at the edge as they look at how to capitalize on all the data that's being generated out in the various edge locations. So everything fundamentally is going to become a hybrid conversation. You'll get there in different ways, and everyone's got different versions of hybrid. Some have multi-hyperscale environments, some have hyperscale, public cloud, private cloud, colo, edge, and all of the above. And the real thing that we've got to be able to do is drive a consistent experience across those clouds. Because right now it's too siloed, it's fragmented. What we do in one environment is not what we do in another, and it's an inefficient way to manage our IT infrastructure. Because hybrid is good, right? Hybrid allows us to innovate, allows us to focus on our line of business application developers where they build once, deploy anywhere, right? So that's a model that, especially as we think about the edge and think about the scenarios of where massive amounts of data are going to be generated out at the edge. When we develop an application, we need to be able to develop it in the data center, train it in the data center or our cloud environment, right? And be able to push that out to the edge. We can't have multiple different application development stacks that we're using between these things. We need to be able to move workloads around. We need to be able to leverage different environments for different workloads, different SLAs, right? There's different reasons we might want to deploy in different locations. And ultimately, the goal, what we're trying to drive to, is an everything as a service model. Right? We want the consumption experience the cloud provides. It's the ease of use, the ability to pay for what we use as we go. That's the model we're driving to. And at HP Discover back this summer, our CEO put a stake in the ground that said, by 2022, in 3 years, we're going to offer everything as a service from HP. So we'll still bring traditional IT infrastructure and traditional IT deployment models, but everything we do is going to be driven as a service and as a service consumption manner, which is a pretty big step for a company that a lot of people still perceive as a hardware company. And truly, we're solutions oriented at trying to deliver solutions to make a better world and help our customers do that. And the way customers want to do that is in this hybrid as a service model. But I'm an engineer, I run an engineering team, and there's vision and reality, right? There's things that we can't do today that we need to be able to do to make this real, right? There's too many, if we think about just in the data space, right? There's different experiences. When we go out and deploy a database service in Azure, it's very different than deploying Box SQL Server on-prem. If we want to manage that service, right? We've got HA requirements, we've got DR requirements. We've got different requirements in our on-premise environment that we don't have in our cloud environment. So what we need to do is be able to bring that experience on-prem, bring that experience to the private data center environments. Can't do it alone, right? We have a big partnership for over 35 years with Microsoft. They're leaning into hybrid as well. We've been working on Azure Stack with them, working on Azure IoT devices with Microsoft. And just this week, they announced Azure Arc and Azure Data Services, which brings the Azure management experience into our on-prem data center environment. And if we think about what that does from the data services layer, it brings evergreen SQL and allows you to keep your database running current, up to date, without having to worry about versioning yourself. It allows you to build elastic scale capability into the database layer running on-prem. Brings a unified management experience, so you're deploying your systems in the same way in Azure as you do in an on-premise environment. And it brings the security elements that Azure provides for vulnerability assessment, and ultimately the cloud billing capability that you're looking for. Now, to make all that work, they leverage Kubernetes as that abstraction layer, data provision on any hardware, any Kubernetes. So this is both a panacea of choice and a Pandora's box of pain, right? So if I put it on a laptop, my experience is going to be very different than a large scale-out Superdome Flex cluster. So that gives us the opportunity for a company like HPE working with Microsoft to really think about how we build these experiences differently, how we build different deployment models around Azure Data Services in an on-prem consumption manner. So now when we think about how we develop those applications and deploy SQL Server, we have the Azure experience from the database level, and we have different ways to deliver the hardware from an infrastructure level, be it HPE GreenLake and the consumption model that the HPE GreenLake hybrid cloud story brings us, be it the reference architecture approach and a build your own model, or things like Azure Stack and some integrated systems that we have partnering with Microsoft. And I think the biggest opportunity in my mind is the intelligent management and our opportunity to drive an AI ops consumption story into Azure Data Services. So if we think about OneView and our management stack that's infrastructure aware, that's got REST APIs for all the capabilities that it delivers, we can really deliver that infrastructure as code. We think about things like InfoSight and our ability to leverage AI ops into the infrastructure for predictive monitoring, for conditional awareness, for performance optimization. As we expose this up into the Azure Data Services stack, now we can deliver a really unified experience for deploying a database server through an Azure service on-prem that is performant, that scales, and meets the SLAs and requirements for that application. So this is a journey we're starting this week. Actually, we started about 3 or 4 months ago with Microsoft. We're working closely with them around some early adopter programs, so we're over there. We can talk to you a little bit about that. We've got a lot of stuff today to help get there, right? We've got a lot of reference architectures that my team builds around SQL 19. We've got a lot of things we're doing with the GreenLake team to deliver that consumption experience out to customers today. And we've got Azure Stack and Azure Stack Edge and Hub now that allow us to start building out that hybrid cloud environment with Microsoft.